Hey. Welcome to episode 277 of Awkwardly Awesome Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Freeman, and today's episode is entitled Through Grief. Expanding Through Grief. As I say that, I'm like, that's not at all an uplifting subject. Do we even want to think about that and talk about it? But grief is part of life because death is part of the life cycle. The people we love in ourselves have a 100% chance of dying one day. Hopefully, in 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 the distant future. Hopefully. However, sometimes death does come suddenly into our lives. The first time this happened to me, I was in fourth or fifth grade, and my dad came in the middle of the day to where I was, and he said, Jason, your best friend John Gridley has been hit by a car, and we need to go to the hospital. We went to the hospital and we waited for a little bit, but all too soon they came. The surgeon came out to let us know that John had died. It is it was an absolute shock, an absolute shock, and so we're going to be talking to someone someone I guess about death and grieving today, but also about joy and living life fully and healing. Please, please, I'm anxious to bring her on, but first, the switch will sound really discordant with what I just talked about, but it's that part of the show. So here we go.
Today's guest, Flo Mina.
Please welcome to Awkwardly Awesome Podcast, Flo Mina.
Thank you for that introduction, Jason. That's awesome. Awkwardly awesome.
Indeed, I hope so. As advertised, Awkwardly Awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show, Flo. It's a huge honor to interview you. So I met you through Bob Donnell, who was a dear friend of mine. Will you talk about how you and Bob met? I know he loved to tell this story.
Oh. We met at a fundraiser in line, not online, but in line at a
Nice.
fundraiser. It was, he knew people because I could tell we were parking our cars, and one of his friends said, "Oh, you can't park here. This parking lot, we gotta." So I heard him say to Bob, "You gotta park your cars over on this lot." So I dropped off my girlfriends and I parked my car. So I was following Bob in, and all of a sudden he was walking and he turns around and starts walking towards me. And I was like, what's he doing? Because there's balloons that were the entryway. And he goes, is this the right way? And I said, yeah, teasing, because I thought, how could he not know that the way he was walking was the right way? But then he turns around and starts I started laughing because he starts walking towards me when I'm walking towards him, towards the entrance. And I said, "No, no, no, you're that's way's the right way."
Look for the balloons.
Right, and he got all flustered. He was like, you know, so he turns around and he walks in, and so we're waiting in line to get our lanyards into this fundraiser, and he starts talking to me. And there was a lot of conversation going on, and one of my girlfriends was getting us tickets in. And so she saw me in line and she goes, "Flo, Flo." And so he starts talking to one of my girlfriends, and I don't know what he called her. He called her trouble or something, and she was like, "Flo, tell him I'm not." So I wasn't even listening to their conversation, and I said, "Okay, no, she's not." And he just looked at me, he goes, "Well, is she?" And I said, "No." And he goes, "Liar." And he was such a vixen that I was shocked. I was like, "He's calling me a liar?" And he goes and I just kinda went, "Okay." And so I kind of ignored him, but through the night, we just kept crossing paths and talking every now and then, and that's how we met.
And what drew you to this man who your first interaction with him is like he didn't read obvious cues and didn't know to where to go, and then your second interaction with him, he called you a liar. What drew you? Like he wasn't starting off with a good track record.
Right? So I was just like, "Alright." So we thought he was trying to, hit on my girlfriend, and we all teased. We all went, "Yeah, he likes you." And she's like, "No, no, Flo, I think he likes you." She was the only one that said, "I think he likes you." 'Cause I was like, "Yeah, he seems like a nice guy for you." For my other girlfriend. So it was kind of funny because by the by the middle of the night or towards the end of the night, he asked for my number, and I was talking with his friend that was at the parking lot telling us to move our cars, and he was telling me about Bob's business and how he was a speaker and how he had an event every month, and I was like, "Why is he telling me about this?" But I found out much later, she never fessed up to it really, that my girlfriend said, "She likes him." So, she had
Mm.
a friend, she liked him, so he was trying to sell Bob basically to me. So when he asked for my number, I thought, "Well, you'd be a good business contact." And when he said business contact, I went, "Oh, shoot, should I type in the right number or the wrong number?" 'Cause, yeah, you're right, it wasn't one of the typical starts to a start of a relationship, but he texted me that night. He said, "It was nice meeting you. I hope you got home safely." And I thought,
Mm.
"Oh, that was a nice."
Mm.
So then the
Mm.
conversation just happened to continue, and we just kept talking.
So how long did it take you and Bob to, like, fall in love?
I think I was the first one that said it. It was probably down the road a few months because I was in a divorce for 20 I had been married for 25 years and a divorced for
Mm.
5, and in that time,
Mm.
that 5 years, I didn't choose to date anybody. So
Mm.
Bob was really the first person that I had gone out on a date.
Mm.
My mind, he had said, "Well, you went on a bike ride with a guy," and he goes, "That's a date." And I go, "That's not a date to me. Just a bike ride because I worked for a bike company and he wanted to try out bikes." And he goes, "Well, to him, it might have been a date." And I go, "Well, I don't think it's considered a date if both parties don't consider it a date."
Mm.
So it was that he was a human behaviorist, so he was like, "Well, no, that's a date." And I was like, "Okay." To me, it wasn't, but so in my mind, Bob was the first one that I had dated.
Nice, nice. So, and you mentioned, and I didn't realize this, about your life flow, but I of course knew about Bob's tragedy because he would mention it a lot in talks he gave and really powerful, but you've said recently that you and Bob, part of your bond was that you both had lost someone hugely significant to you when you were younger. Would you talk a little about your high school sweetheart,
Okay.
please?
When Bob and I first met, our first date really was at a taco place. It was Taco Tuesday.
Oh gosh, Bob's a
Yeah,
charmer.
Bob
Oh
loved
my gosh.
I love tacos too. So it was a great date, and when he was telling me about his daughter, that she had passed when she was 3,
Where would you tell that story, please?
okay, he was telling me that he had also experienced, marriage and divorce and loss, and that he was following his daughter, the car that his daughter was in, home, and he saw the car go through the red light, and it was like slow motion to him, and it hit the pole, and he realized, "Oh my gosh, that has my daughter in it." And he got her out. I guess she was unconscious, and he gave her CPR until the medics arrived, and a few days later in the hospital, she was considered brain dead, so they decided to donate her organs, and she passed, and she was 3 years old at the time. So when he had told me that story, I said, "Wow, we have something in common because when I was in high school, my boyfriend at the time was 2 years older than I was. He was a senior in high school, and he was on his way to my house, and he was in a car accident and also passed just days before my 16th birthday." So it really wasn't a sweet 16 birthday like most 16-year-olds would have. Um,
And both these things happen just so absolutely suddenly out of nowhere.
right, right. Car accidents, and it was just something that we had in common. So we both had experienced loss. I couldn't imagine though, and he couldn't imagine for me losing, the first love of my life, and I couldn't imagine losing a child, being a mother. I was
Oh,
like, "Wow, I don't know how you did it." And he was like, "I don't know how you did it."
mhm.
So that was kind of like a connection we had.
So you're talking about these pretty heavy. he- I mean, these subjects, divorce and losing loved ones, probably aren't the most typical first date material. I just am thinking of the idea that we kind of look up as on the first date and kind of just say stuff to impress the other person. But but you and Bob were suddenly having this very, very deep conversation about some of the deepest aspects of your life.
Right, for both of us. So we definitely determined we were both survivors of transitions. Uh,
Both survivors of transition.
yeah, yeah.
What does that phrase mean to you, Flo? Survivor of transition.
life goes on. It just keeps going. So just there was a meme that had come up, and it's been in my mind a lot. Some that you have to sometimes let go of the picture of what you thought your life was going to be and live in the joy of the life you're living right now. So that's pretty much my motto right now. And I could tell with Bob being, you know, a human behaviorist, he really did find to look at everything positively instead of, because it's easy to go with the negative. We just had a conversation this morning in another group that I was in that it's so easy to just veer to the negative. And it is really hard to stay positive and look for the
Mm.
positive.
It is so easy to go towards the negative.
Yeah. So I've learned that with steps and even through his training, since he was a coach, a speaker, and a human behaviorist, he kind of knew, that was his thing, being on stage, and I loved watching him and be on that stage, and he was like, "I could train you, I could do this." And I did his programs, his trainings, and that's pretty much how I was able to even survive the transition of his passing.
Before we get to that, part of Bob's mission, it seems to me, was to comfort those who were grieving. He go to like some w- did he go to where some mass shootings had happened to
Yes.
to be present and be there for the survivors?
Yes, he was great. He was suicide prevention. He would also go to the mass shootings. The one I went with him once to the Vegas shooting at the concert. It was the country concert, the biggest one. And I was there on another event, and he just happened to just be there. And the things that just placed, I mean, we immediately just asked a police officer what we could do, or he did. And all of a sudden, he's in direct contact with the mayor, the chief of police. It was just amazing how the
Mm.
doors opened for him. And then he would just post on Facebook, "Hey, I'm here in Vegas. Who do I need to see, meet?" So people would say, "Oh, you gotta go see so and so in the hospital." And he would just go in and just start talking to him or holding place for people that were looking at a cross that was on the side. And he would just watching him in his realm of how he talked to people was amazing. A lot of that I learned from him on
And
how to talk to people.
in this, he was doing this entirely on a volunteer basis, right?
Everything was volunteer.
Oh,
Everything.
I hadn't realized that. So you and Bob were just happened to already be in Las Vegas when this happened.
Right, right. I was already on my way, and he was like, "Well, gosh, I'll just ride with you guys." And I was like, "Alright." And it was, I mean, he went to there was one death of a police officer, and so he went, and just him talking to the police officers on and the questions he would ask was like, "Well, how was it for your, feeling that way?" And even just the taxi cabs or the Uber drivers,
Mm.
how are you feeling? And just letting them talk it out and him being so present and listening intently on their answers. One of the cops said to him, I remember him saying, "What did that night feel like?" He goes, "Man, that was the first time I was ever scared on the job." And the
Oh.
other officers just kinda went, "Ooh." they just kinda all disappeared and let him have that one-on-one with Bob. It was
Mm.
it was kind of probably very comforting for that police officer that needed to get that off his chest. And Bob was the one that could probably ask the right questions to make him feel more at ease and peace.
Mm. So Bob experienced this phenomenal horrible loss of his daughter, and instead of being like, "Oh, death is scary, death is absolutely miserable. I want nothing to do with death." He he really stepped into to helping people who were suffering in the same way he had suffered.
I think right, he learned how to move through the process to feel but he went deep on the levels to survive that transition. I mean, like I said, I couldn't imagine losing a child being a mother, and he was like, I couldn't imagine losing at a young age, the first love of your life. So we were both like, well, we both survived, but his way, the process that he went through, I don't know if you want me to share the process that he went through of just getting through, because he said the grief did consume him at first. And then he thought, well, that's where I just got to start getting the boots on and pulling myself back up because life does go on. And that's where the whole Mastering Your Inner Game, when he authored that book, came from. And then he did the
Mm,
video series. There was seven pillars to the video series, which I went through multiple times, many times. And that was the whole basis of his work, was through that experiencing, eh, moving through the grief with Maisie when she passed.
mm. Macy. And speaking of grief, and mm, none of this is easy to talk about, but I guess the good parts are the more joyful parts are easier to talk about. But I really don't want to talk about this next part.
Mm.
In November 2024, I'm I mean Bob and I were friends, good friends, but we weren't in touch constantly, and I suddenly look on Facebook and there's a post about Bob being really sick. So he went in and to the hospital in November and passed away on Christmas Eve. What what were those 6 weeks like?
It was a roller coaster ride because he'd be great one day, really great, where he'd be talking and making decisions and saying, "No, I don't want that. Yeah, I want that procedure." And then there were days that it was, "Well, what happened? Wha what and then it was like, "Oh, well," you know, even the doctors were scratching their head because they were like, "Well, he waxes and wanes. We don't know.
Mm,
We're trying this medicine. We're trying this." But he wasn't a drinker. He didn't take any, meds, didn't like really taking meds. So he pretty much had a clean body. So when they were giving him these medications and stuff, he kind of had some reactions to them.
mm,
So they kind of were like testing, well, let's do this, let's do this. And so he went through quite a few tests, and
mm,
it's just even the medical staff was like, wow, this isn't the outcome that we thought was going to happen.
mm,
I go, none of us did, but he was in there for 40 days,
Mm.
and that was like a lifetime. But you just never knew. You were just like, "Well, do you wanna gonna come home?" And then the medical staff was like, "Well, we have to wait for a bed to open, at this facility for care to get him, back on his feet." And then something else would happen, so then they would have to
Mm.
do something else. So we were just it was just so unknown, and it was at that point, it was just a lot of we had to rely on faith and just kinda surrender and say, "Okay, we're just here for support and just to go with the flow, with the W."
Flow with a W. Mm. Do you have any ideas for family and friends if they have a loved one who is who has a long hospital stay? What are just a few tips about
Yeah,
surviving a long hospital?
yeah. You really have to be an advocate these days with the doctors because they switch shifts and the main hospitalist could be gone, 7 days later. And then you got a new hospitalist that you're talking to, and it's there was so many levels. I mean, he was in ICU, or he was, in the step down unit, then he was back into comfort care, then he was back into the step down unit. So it was just always something moving and going on. So there was different doctors you had to deal with. So you just gotta be there and watch and make sure that, the night staff kinda knew me, and it's kind of great that we knew some of the medical people, some local, that we could say, "Well, can we make sure the transition, they give the notes," and they did. They were really good, but sometimes you just had to watch because it was like, "Well, gosh, that's what put him," you gave him that drug last time, and that's what made him spiral down, and you gave it to him again. Why, well, that was the best one that worked. And so, yeah, you really have to be an advocate. You really have to watch, even with senior care, even going into a rehab, any of those. I was talking to a lot of my medical friends, and that was the advice. Just really pay attention, watch, get to know the staff, and make them take notes. You take lots of notes too. Oh, yeah, it's not an easy feat. And bless them that are going through long hospital stays.
Thanks for giving us some tips on that. Then on Christmas Eve, at what time?
It was in the evening, early evening. It was about 5 or 6 o'clock when it all was happening. That day, he was breathing different. And I was talking with our friend, Dr. Bill Janishak,
Mm.
and I took a picture, and he was like, "Ooh, I know that look." And I talked to his daughter, and I was like, Something's different today."
Mm.
And she just happened to call me that evening and say, "Hey, you want DoorDash? You want, what are you doing?" And I go, "I'm just hanging out." And I go, "But his breathing got really different when she called." So we were blessed. I called it a blessing that we were both on the phone when he took his last breath. So,
Mm.
and she was on the phone, and she wanted to administer CPR if there was a chance. So I had walked out of the room, and I said, "Brittany, that I think that was his last breath. Do you want to administer CPR?" And she was shocked, but she was
Mm.
there, and at least she was able to say yes. So I was I was able to tell the nurse because we were on FaceTime, and so the nurse started, and I stepped out of the room so all the staff
Mhm.
could do their job. And,
Mhm.
with him being there for 40 days, I knew all the staff that was was pretty much there coming in. So it was kind of, a relief that they kinda knew me, and it was helpful in a way that we had a relationship. It wasn't just,
Mm.
I was a stranger, and they knew our situation. They knew that I was there by his side, every
Mm.
day, or I would come
Mm.
every day. And they would joke around. They would joke around. There was another, since I'm Filipino descent, there was a Filipino nurse that was there, and I said, "Tell him who I am, Bob." And he was like, 'cause it became the joke that I was the favorite wife, because being his girlfriend, they really wouldn't kind of like, "Well, are you a significant other?" So I became the favorite wife. So I was like, "Bob, tell her who I am." And he was like, "Oh, no, no, no." And he was joking around. He was like, "No, Mamacita's my favorite." And I I started laughing, and then the Filipino nurse, she had an accent, and she goes, "Oh, Bob, I think you're in trouble." So they were all, we had a relationship with the staff, and just them knowing, and when they announced, that that was the time of death, they all came, and most of them gave me hugs and everything, and it was just a peaceful feeling that I was at peace. It was strange, but it was just, like, significant. I mean, I don't know, it was 40 days in the hospital. It was like, wow, that was just it's a biblical number. So I was like, for some reason, I just said, "Well played, God, well played. 40 days. On
Mhm.
Christmas Eve, well played."
So then and this is crucial to your story. You went home and someone who has just lost a significant other could do like a wide variety of things in an empty house. What you did was very intentional. Will you please talk about that?
That was It was, well, being there for 40 days, we had a lot of stuff there. I mean, people brought little Christmas trees, little sign, just there was a lot of stuff. I mean, we had pillows, blankets. So I was taking everything to the car and loading the car and just pretty much having a conversation with God, because I was like, "Okay, 40 days." And, I was like, "Wow, we dated for 7 years." So these were all, like, numbers that were significant. And so I kinda had a heart to heart with God talk with me, and I kind of was like, snarkily said, "Okay, God, what's next?" Because Bob was my sounding board, my mentor, my coach, my partner. What's next? I get home, I'm unloading the car with all the stuff, and I'm talking with his daughter. She's having, you know, uh, her own, meltdown, and I
She just lost a beloved dad.
right, and they were very close, very close. So, we're talking, she wants me to drive 3 hours to her, and it's late at night, and I'm like, "I'm just gonna stay put. It's Christmas Eve, tomorrow's Christmas Day." And we talk, we get all the stuff that girlfriends are calling me saying the same thing, "Come to me," and they're hours away. Even the local gals are like, You want me to, it's Christmas Eve. I go, you're there with your family. I'm going to just reflect today
Mm.
and just set the timer. That was one of Bob's tips.
Set the timer and do what?
And do whatever you feel. Give yourself permission to feel the feels. So I set my timer, and when that timer went off, I did whatever if I wanted to cry, shout, scream, yell at God, whatever, I gave myself permission.
How long do you think you set the timer for?
I set it for 25 minutes. And I just sat there, I turned on his playlist, and I just felt it. I just let it go, let it out, released it. And then when that timer went off, I called a girlfriend because his thing was do that, give yourself permission to do that, but then go do something for somebody else. I called a girlfriend and said, okay, actually it was his daughter. And I said, okay, how are you doing? What do you need done? And she was having a hard time. So I went and did all the stuff with the mortuary. And it was probably close to midnight now by the time we were still getting it all done. And she was doing her thing to make her feel better. She was researching she goes, Dad was a donator. So he would have wanted to donate whatever he could. So she was researching that. And so on Christmas Day, that was the gift, was that he was able to donate certain things like a skin for skin graft, bones, and other things that they could use before he wanted to be cremated. So before that was all done.
And then you actually went to the mortuary that evening on Christmas Eve?
No, I didn't. I just called them. And so they still had to go we had to get arranged for them to pick up Bob at the hospital and then bring him to the mortuary. So I had a conversation he had done, this mortuary had done my dad. So we also knew, and there was a good friend of mine recommended. So I just had to say, I'm a friend of, this person. And
Mm,
he was like, oh gosh, he even remembered my dad, being
mm,
buried there and
mm.
them handling and that was years ago. So I was like, wow, he has a good memory. But so
And
it was a process, but one that needed to be done and one that helped me move through, Christmas and even just move through the loss. I don't consider death a loss. I consider it a death, a transition, because in my belief, I know we'll see each other again.
hmm. Wonderful, wonderful. I just had the vision of seeing Bob again. Oh, good. So a few days later, were you on Facebook?
It was actually the next day I was on Facebook because,
So this is on Christmas Day.
yeah, Brittany had posted that, dad was able to give a gift. And on Christmas Day, I mean, she did a beautiful post about how her dad was able to donate, certain things that people needed for surgeries so that, life can still continue even though he physically wasn't here anymore.
That's beautiful. It's powerful. But when did you see the post about the Facebook inviting you to the Facebook group?
You mean Pedro's group?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it was an ad, and this gentleman named Pedro Adeo, known as the challenge guy, starts telling, this story about, oh, learn the book of Proverbs. We're going to do a chapter a day in the whole month of January. It's a free challenge. Um, you can learn the Bible. And me being raised Catholic, I was like, oh, Bob and I had a conversation about this because he would always spout Bible verses. And being Catholic, we never really got to read the Bible. I told him we had a discussion. I was like, I don't even know if you're right. I was challenging it.
Mhm.
And so we got in a little discussion. And I said, the last time I read a Bible was in Bible as literature in high school. And they don't even offer that anymore because it's, I don't know, they just don't offer it anymore. And he kind of teased and said, I have a Bible for you. And I was like, I always wanted to learn the Bible. And I knew he was raised learning and reading the Bible because he would always do verses. And he was watching one of the other speakers talk about the book of Proverbs. And I didn't even know. I was like, why are you watching that? And he would say, I used to teach the book of Proverbs too. And I just wanted to see what he had to say about that. And I was like, I didn't know that.
So what made you say, I mean, this is the just the next day. What made you say yes to join Pedro's group instead of saying, oh, that sounds good, but I'm in mourning right now. I'm going to put that off a year or two and
Right. I remembered that question that I snarkily asked God, what's next? And then here comes Pedro, not just once or twice, this ad on Facebook. It was multiple times, "Hey, I'm Pedro Deo. Hey, I'm," it was like, "Can't get rid of this guy." What was, you skip the ad. But it was something Pedro said, one, it was free. One, it was just a challenge. It was kind of like a challenge. And I don't know, I'm kind of one that when you tell me no, or you tell me you can't do that, I'm like, "Oh, okay, challenge accepted." I kinda said, "Yeah, might as well." So I just said, "What else am I gonna do?"
so over the weeks you got more and more into Pedro's group and you eventually signed signed up for like a VIP group. In just a few sentences, w- w- can you say what belonging to Pedro's group ha- has given you over the last 2 years?
Wow. Well, it was all of last year I was in Pedro's group, and we read the book of Proverbs every day.
Last 1 year, I guess.
Yeah, and it's been a learning experience. It has been expansion, because that's my word of the year is expand. He helped me with my business and just it trajected in ways that I didn't even think I could do. Well, even like speaking, because when I would tell Bob, I have my own business. I'm the farm girl. I'm I'm not into the speaking world. And he goes, "Oh no, you got this. People are attracted to, you and they listen to you." Like kind of how he would say, "I wish I had a speech impediment, Jason." I remember when he said that.
Yeah.
People lean in and they listen to you. I wish that they leaned in and listened to me like like they do with you. And he would boost me up about that. Bob was good about that. And I was like, "No, that's your calling. That's your thing." So this pretty much with Pedro made me kinda pivot basically, and it just all kinda happened where I have my line of jams and jellies and my crackle, and my co-packer
And how long had you had this business?
oh gosh, 2006, since
So this business was your work life. I
Right,
mean, this is what you did.
right. So, when my co-packer I finally got a co-packer to produce my jam and jelly, when he said, "Hey, we're gonna be retiring, we're gonna close up shop." So, we're not gonna have another co-packer. And the way jam and jelly is made here in California, you have to get state licenses, and a co-packer has to get all these things, and you have to pay for each flavor. So, we had a talk, and even Bob was coaching me on it, going, "Well, what sells?" And, I always had an inventory of jam and jelly, but I never had an inventory of my candy called Crackle.
What kind of candy is Crackle, just for people who
Crackle
don't.
is a peanut brittle, but doesn't act like peanut brittle because it's light and airy, it's not a tooth breaker.
It's so good. So good.
And and it actually is named Crackle because one of our friends would say, It's not peanut brittle, don't call it peanut brittle." And even Bob was like, "It's an unbrittle, like 7 Up was a Uncola,
It's
unbrittle. So, call it Crackle the Unbrittle." So it is, I actually have a little bag here, it's called Crackle the Unbrittle, light and airy. And so it just evolved into Crackle. So Bob was saying, "Just do that one thing, just do your Crackle." And I was like, "But my heart was jam and jelly." That's how I evolved into the business, because when you ask you grew up as a farm girl, I was like, "Yeah, I hated to work on the farm as a kid." So my excuse was to go in the kitchen to make anything. So
Mhm.
I don't know, I was probably 8 or 9. We had a huge crop of blackberries, and my mom said, "Make some jam, make some pies." I was like, "Okay." If it was gonna keep me out of the field and picking anything, I was in the kitchen making jam and making pies. Did I know how to make jams and pies? No, but my mom gave me Betty Crocker recipe book, and she goes, "Read the recipe." And I was like, glad to, because the longer it's gonna take me to be in the kitchen, then I don't have to be out in the field. So that's kind of where it ironically evolved into when my kids were born and we went to a fundraiser at the high school. There was a gal there selling homemade jam, and I was so excited because she had tasters, and I was like, "Do you have blackberry?" And she said, "Yes," and I was so excited because I was like, "Oh, there kids, there's nothing like homemade jam." And I tried it, and I was so excited and so disappointed at the same time because I was like, "This is not how I remember it tasting." So I said to the kids, "I could do so much better." And they're like, "Mom, you should do it then. You should do it."
Aw.
So that's how Farm Girl Edibles came about, where I said, "You're right. I'm gonna make my own line of jam and jelly." The crackle was just as a gift that I would give for Christmas or whatever that I would make, but people were saying, "This is so good. You gotta sell this stuff." So at farmers markets, I started selling the crackle and the jellies, and they were all going. But the guys were always in line for the crackle. Every week, they would get their fix. So that's why they said, "You need to call it crackle," and they would do this, they would do this, "Hey, we gotta get our fix."
Nice,
That's why
nice.
I'm like, it's crackle.
So you're going to keep the Crackle part of farm the Crackle the Crackle division of Fungal Edibles.
Right, right,
What
and as soon as my inventory of the jelly, because the co-packer retired, gosh, March 31st, and he was supposed to go till the end, and he was like, "No, we're not going till the end of 2026. We're retiring now." So, whatever inventory I have a few cases left, and I have 2 flavors that have already sold out, so I have 4 remaining. So, Farm Girl Edibles will transition into Farm Girl Crackle, and then my as one door closes, another one opens. Farm Girl Next Level will be doing the coaching and the grief, moving through the grief,
uh,
expanding. the expansion path.
Moving through the grief,
Moving through the grief process, yeah, because through that year of with Pedro, I also had a high school friend who's a pastor at a local church. He invited me to his grief share, and that was an experience that I was like, "Wow, people are stuck in grief."
mm,
And it was a it was it was nice that they were there talking about it, but it was April, I think, so it was just a few months after Bob's passing, and I was already in the mode of, "Okay, I'm gonna transition. I'm gonna go more into the grief and talking about moving through grief." But this kinda was going through the grief share and experiencing that. It kinda pushed me more. I felt it was like God saying, "See, you really need to do this. People are stuck." And there was one lady there that I just felt for her. She was talking about her loss or her death of her husband, and then a week later, the death of her son. And she started to pick up a tissue and started to tear up a little bit, and I just kinda felt for her, and then when she said 4 years ago, and I was she's been feeling that for 4 years? Holy moly, I don't wanna be that, and it just kind of moved me to say, "You really you really need to help with this issue of people being stuck and just help them move along."
so you talk about the word grief and the word expansion in the same sentence. How how are those words related to you?
Well, the grief is actually the acronym of my framework. So I have the G standing for, you know, gratitude and grounding. So those 2 kind of work together because when you have gratitude, when you find that there's always something to be thankful for, it really grounds you.
Mm,
And then the R is releasing and reflecting. The I is implementing and I'm gonna forget what the and intention, being intentional. The E is engaging and expanding,
wow.
and then the F is freedom, and
Wow.
there's another F that I have, and it's escaping me, but when you do all of those, you do get that freedom. Um, and
That's beautiful.
yeah, and just like when you it's easy as setting that timer and giving yourself permission to feel all the feels, you get that freedom, but you gotta do the work, and it's like I was telling you before we started, another high school friend had just passed yesterday morning, and we were just getting together a lot some of the girlfriends said, "Let's go to lunch." And it just happened that she had passed that morning, so we all gave her a toast, but
Mm,
all it was just a reminder that we all have to do the work continually. It's a non
mm.
there's always gonna be and as we get older, you're gonna have that more and more that you're continually doing the work, but it becomes easier when you've done the hard work.
Bob would be so proud, Flo, that you have an acronym.
Aw, thank you. He was a great coach.
Uh, so, this is important. So you're obviously helping people through grief about around the loss of a loved one. But what other grief? What other types of grieving might you help someone through?
Gosh, even a pet, when that pet passes, that could be their family. Most pets are
Yeah, yeah.
and sometimes it's even harder because the pet doesn't really communicate. You could see through
mm,
their eyes and everything, but sometimes people can get stuck with a pet. So I help with the pet, the same acronym. I can help with the death of a marriage, divorce,
mm,
a death of a dream.
mm.
Some
Why can a death of a dream be so devastating? How
Oh,
can death of a dream be?
like a job that you wanted, and you didn't get it. That could be, your dream of your dreams of like I said, you gotta let go sometimes of the picture of what you thought your life was gonna be and just live in the moment and find the joy, the gratitude that you're living right now.
So, if people are, if people are listening and they're like, I'm in grief over something major, and Flo is what Flo is saying is resonating with me. How should they contact you?
I have a 15-minute discovery call. It's free to see if we can help each other. Yeah, so they can either contact me through Farm Girl Edibles, they can send me an an email, and yeah, if this is resonating with you and you need to be unstuck and you need a roadmap to kind of because everybody's individual, everybody's different, everybody has different beliefs, everybody has a different meaning of
Mm,
death. Like I said, I don't consider death a loss, and other people do. So I just work with them because I've been Bob was always open-minded, and that was one of his
mm,
criteria was to be open-minded.
mm,
And so I feel I can help people because 'cause I'm open-minded enough, but
mm,
you also have to be open-minded to be able to see or be coachable
mm.
in in what I'm saying or doing or having you do to help move you through the process.
So
So
we could talk another 2 hours, but we it's about to wrap up. But two more questions. Would you please tell a little about the wonderful painting behind you?
this is done by Sergio, and we got to see him at Secret Knock. I didn't see you at Secret Knock this year, but this is of
Mm,
Garth Brooks, and Bob would have a monthly meeting, which you were one of the speakers one time, and Sergio was one of the speakers, and he painted this. He asked Bob who's his favorite singer or artist, and he said Garth Brooks. And this one is special because Garth Brooks has a song, and it's The Dance.
mm,
And in that, Bob had wrote some of the lyrics, and it was to Macy that he wished he wouldn't have had that last dance that he would have done, and he wanted to give that business card to Garth and personally hand it to Garth, and he actually did. And Bob and Garth had a wonderful, deep, one-on-one conversation for, like, 45 minutes at an event that Bob was at. I don't know what it was if it was the Grammys or that details, but it was at he was practicing, Garth was practicing, and in that, with all the background and everything, they were able to have just a one-on-one deep conversation about how he moved on without Macy.
mm,
And with Garth having 3 girls of his own, he just
mm,
couldn't imagine. So, that's why this special painting of Garth Brooks is behind me, and I was like, "Oh, I would love to have it behind me." This is one of
mm,
Bob's favorite, so it does look like he's looking over my shoulder right now, making sure we're doing it right.
mm. And then the last question, and I ask all my guests this, Flo, is what does doing your imperfect best mean to you? What it means to me is I envision the best I want for my life and to offer the world, and I go for it. But mistakes come up, uncertainties come up, and instead of being stopped by them, I try to learn from all that imperfection and go once again towards my best. What does doing your imperfect best mean to you?
Wow, that brings up a great quote from Bob. We're all imperfect. And he surrounded himself with people who always loved him and in his imperfect self. So gosh, he always strived and told everybody, well, how would your best version of yourself show up? That was always what he was saying. It would say, and he would say, because when you're not operating at your best, the world is operating at a deficit.
Hmm.
And when he was in the hospital,
Hmm.
he was sleeping, and I heard him say, "The world is perfect." And I said, "What did you say?" And he said, "The world is perfect." And I said, "So does that mean you're operating at your best version of yourself?" And he opened his eyes, and he was like looking at me like, "Don't be coaching me."
Hmm. Hmm.
Just kind of like faded back to sleep. He kind of mumbled a little bit, and I was like, "Is that a yes? Is that a yes?" So that's just a reminder that just gotta operate at the best version of you,
Oh, I
whatever
love
that is.
that.
So that
Hey,
my list.
thanks so much, Flo. Thanks for the journey you're on. Thanks for really loving and cherishing Bob, and thanks for being here. And please, on a minor note, please, I'm going to wrap this up, but please stay on the line because it takes a minute to upload. Okay.
Okay. Thank you to Jason. I appreciate, just gosh, you were welcoming me, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, he picked me." I just was like, "Oh my gosh, thank you. Thank you for having me." It's
Oh,
been
you're welcome. This has been wonderful.
You were one of Bob's favorites.
Oh, and thanks you all for tuning in and really thinking about this subject that many of I would think most humans find challenging. And and as you think about it, re- always remember that even though subjects like this can be fearful and bring up all manners of emotion, remember that you are the best. Remember that you are the one and only one of you who can do exactly what you can do on this earth. So thanks for being you and going through this life with all the emotions and all the challenges and also all the love and the opportunities. Thanks for being you and tune in next time for another awkwardly awesome podcast. Next week, if you're watching around this time, but if you're watching 500 years from now, you'll probably have to watch reruns because I will have transitioned by then. Anyway, thank you, and remember to smile.